The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning here at 5 a.m. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Maddie Jansen alongside Chris Burton, who is in today for Alex.
17 News is your local election headquarters. Former President Trump last night formally announcing his 2024 presidential bid, and it comes as he's politically vulnerable, with even some within his own party blaming him for Republicans underperforming in the midterm election. Control of the House remains on the cusp of being called, with the GOP favored to take a very slim majority, picking up far fewer seats than many expected. Democrats keep control of the Senate. NBC's Alice Barr has the latest from Washington.
Former President Trump launching his third run for the White House.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
He's already filed the paperwork, making it official and kicking off the 2024 presidential race before the midterm results have fully settled in. With Democrats keeping control of the Senate and Republicans picking up far fewer seats than expected in the House, some are blaming former President Trump, who backed many of the GOP's losing candidates. Even close advisors urged him to delay until after next month's Georgia Senate runoff. The former president defiant.
America's comeback starts right now.
But recent polls show him trailing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in a head-to-head matchup. DeSantis, who has yet to announce his presidential plans, pitching his landslide victory for governor as a roadmap for Republican success.
Florida, I think, really shows the blueprint.
Former President Trump will also be running against his own legal troubles and likely President Biden, who's feeling emboldened at the G20 summit after Democrats' better than expected midterm results. The president taking a global leadership role in the escalating crisis between Russia and Ukraine that risks drawing in NATO allies. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Ivanka Trump, meantime, says she will not be involved in her father's run for the White House in 2024. She released a statement overnight saying she loves her father, but she does, quote, not plan to be involved in politics. Instead, she plans to prioritize her young children and, quote, the private life they are creating as a family. That's her and her husband. Ivanka says she will support her father outside the political arena.
Republicans in the House of Representatives unofficially chose Bakersfield Congressman Kevin McCarthy as their next speaker yesterday by a vote of 188 to 31. McCarthy's nomination over Freedom Caucus member Andy Biggs is an important step in McCarthy's long quest for the House speakership, but not the last by far. McCarthy will need the support of 218 members to get the role in January. That means in the next month and a half, he'll need to find a way to win over around 30 skeptics, depending on the size of Republicans' majority.
Kevin McCarthy couldn't get 218 votes. He couldn't get 200 votes. He couldn't get 190 votes today. So to believe that Kevin McCarthy is going to be Speaker, you have to believe he's going to get votes in the next 6 weeks that he couldn't get in the last 6 years.
Yesterday's vote comes amid a rift in the conservative House Freedom Caucus, with some members vowing to vote against McCarthy. Others, such as Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, giving McCarthy the nod. In order to get their vote, the Freedom Caucus is asking for McCarthy to commit to some of their demands, such as making it easier to oust the Speaker.
Meantime, the Kern County Elections Office released updated results yesterday. We'll take a look at where some of our biggest races stand, starting with the 22nd Congressional District, which is one of just several House races that are still too close to call. Hanford Republican Congressman David Valadao leading with 52% of the vote. Bakersfield Assemblyman Rudy Salas trails with 48%. In the 16th state Senate race, Republican David Shepard still leading Democratic incumbent Melissa Hurtado. The margin there also 52% to 48%. And in the race for 35th Assembly District, Bakersfield Dr. Jasmine Baines still leading against Leticia Perez. Baines with 60% of the vote as of news time this morning, Perez at 40%.
All right, now to the race for Kern's 3rd District Supervisor seat. There are fewer than 700 votes separating the two candidates. Jeff Flores leading with 51% right now of the vote, Brian Smith at 49%. Voters nearly split down the middle on Measure K. That's a 1-cent sales tax increase for unincorporated Kern County. Yes and no votes both at 50% this morning. The yes votes just barely edging out the no's with 300 more votes. And take a look at this. The support for Measure L has widened. The last election update had voters split down the middle with a razor-thin difference of just 18 votes. Measure L now growing that lead with 52% of the vote. A yes vote supports amending the Bakersfield City Charter to remove the requirement that the fire chief and police chief be appointed from within their respective departments. 100% of precincts are reporting, but don't let that fool you. There are still plenty of ballots left to be counted.
And making news around the nation. Maddie, we've been waiting on this one for a while.
Long time.
This morning, a new era in American space exploration is officially underway. The Artemis 1 SLS rocket launched from Kennedy Space Center early this morning. Next stop, the moon. If the mission is successful, it will set the stage for Americans to return to the lunar surface in just a few years. NBC's Chris Pallone is at the Kennedy Space Center with the story.
3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition.
America is headed back to the moon.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
After 2 scrubbed launch attempts and 2 hurricane delays, the most powerful rocket NASA has ever built, the SLS, lit up the night sky and rattled the ground across Florida's Space Coast as it roared toward the heavens. It's on a 26-day mission, sending the uncrewed Orion capsule to orbit the moon for 2 weeks before returning to Earth and splashing down in the Pacific next month.
We're beyond the one small step. Now we're into the giant leap part of it now.
With Artemis 1 now in space, the next mission will send astronauts to orbit the moon in about 2 years. Then in 2025 or 26, Americans will land on the lunar surface for the first time since the 70s.
It's a future where NASA will land the first woman and the first person of color on the moon.
During the Apollo program, the moon was the goal. Now with Artemis, it's just the beginning.
This is about putting footsteps into the solar system to be permanent explorers. So not only the moon, but asteroids, Mars, and eventually beyond.
The rocket endured Hurricane Nicole's wrath last week out on the launch pad. High winds blew strips of rubber caulk off the Orion capsule, stoking fears the mission would have to be delayed again. But engineers decided the rocket was safe to fly, setting the stage for this morning's spectacular launch.
About halfway through this mission, the Orion crew capsule will be about 300,000 miles away from Earth as it orbits the moon. That will be deeper into space than any spacecraft designed for humans has ever gone. At Kennedy Space Center in Florida, I'm Chris Pallone, 17 News.
And we're back here at 5:14 in your 17 News Homicide Tracker. An investigation's underway this morning after a deadly shooting in Rosamond. The Kern County Sheriff's Office says it happened November 10th, just after 6 a.m. on Sierra Highway, south of Hillcrest Avenue. Deputies say the victim, a man, died at the scene. Anyone with information on the shooting is urged to call KCSO at 861-3110 or the secret witness line at 322-4040. By our count, this is the 90th homicide in Kern County so far this year.
17 Crime Watch now. Police are asking for help identifying a man who approached 2 girls on a northwest Bakersfield street and exposed himself. Police say the man pulled up to the girls in a car Sunday afternoon right here on Olive Drive between Allen and Old Farm Roads. He allegedly exposed himself and asked them to get in his car. Police released this composite image of the man. He's described as Hispanic in his 40s, thin build, dark complexion with a black mustache and goatee. Police say he was driving an older model black Toyota sedan with a red sheet partition separating the front and back seats. Anyone with information on his identity is asked to call BPD. That number 327-7111. The BPD has released this image of one of the cars they believe hit and killed a local mother of 3 the night of November 4th. It happened around 10:30 that night on Stockdale Highway near California Avenue. Police say 34-year-old Megan Nicole Fanucci was crossing the street outside of the crosswalk when she was hit by a silver sedan with a rear spoiler. She was then run over by another vehicle, a black Chevy or GMC pickup truck. Police say both drivers took off. Investigators are looking for that vehicle that we showed you earlier, an early 2000s silver Toyota Celica with major damage to the passenger side. If you recognize it, call police.
In our 17 News follow-up file this morning, the Wasco City Council took another step toward establishing its own police department last night. The council voted to hire Charlie Fivecoat as the city's transitional chief of police. 5 Code has more than 3 decades of law enforcement experience, which includes time with KCSO and the Shafter Police Department. Last month, the Wasco City Council voted to form a city-run police department. The Kern County Sheriff's Department will remain in Wasco until that's complete. And turning now to Russia's war in Ukraine, at least 2 people were killed after what appears to either be a Russian or possibly a Ukrainian missile that fell into Poland last night. U.S. and European officials suggest a Ukrainian air defense system was involved in the incident. An investigation now underway to determine if the strike was deliberate. NBC's Bree Jackson is in Washington with more.
Maddie, President Biden expressed his condolences to Poland and held an emergency meeting with G7 and NATO leaders to discuss the attack. A tense and deadly situation in Poland as the country investigates how and why a Russian-made missile crossed the border with Ukraine, killing at least 2 Polish citizens. President Biden met with world leaders overseas and condemned the crime.
The moment when the world had come together at the G20 to urge de-escalation, Russia continues to has chosen to escalate in Ukraine.
The president says it is unlikely the missile was launched from Russia. Russia's defense ministry denied any involvement in the strikes.
Wszystkich zapewniam, President Joe Biden.
Poland says its government is investigating the matter and raising its military preparedness. The U.S. is pledging its support for a fellow NATO member.
I can assure you we will determine what happened and what appropriate next steps would be.
While the investigation is ongoing, military analysts say there needs to be a strong reaction from European allies and the United States while assisting Ukraine.
We have to keep our focus on is how do we support Ukraine politically, economically, diplomatically, covert action, military technology, military training.
As the war escalates, President Zelensky vows we will survive everything. Ukrainian forces remaining defiant against Russian aggression.
Whatever they're planning, they will be crushed.
President Biden reassuring Ukraine and NATO allies.
We continue to do whatever it takes to give them the capacity to defend themselves.
And offering assistance with Poland's investigation into the deadly attack. If Russia did deliberately target Poland, it could trigger a response from the 30-member NATO alliance at a time when Russian forces have suffered several major setbacks in their war against Ukraine. In Washington, I'm Bree Jackson for 17 News.
Making headlines around the state this morning, the man accused of attacking House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband has pleaded not guilty to federal charges. David DePape made his first appearance in federal court yesterday. DePape is charged with breaking into the Pelosi home and attacking Paul Pelosi with a hammer. He pleaded not guilty to attempted kidnapping and assaulting a family member of a federal official. DePape has also pleaded not guilty to state charges, including attempted murder. The wife of California Governor Gavin Newsom took the stand again yesterday in the sexual assault trial of former film producer Harvey Weinstein. Jennifer Siebel Newsom faced cross-examination from one of Weinstein's attorneys about her description of an encounter with the filmmaker in 2005. Siebel Newsom says Weinstein raped her in a Beverly Hills hotel suite. Weinstein's attorney claims that Newsom's encounter with his client was consensual and that she did it to advance her career.
I think the defense's tactics show that they were just there to bully her, to try and get her to admit that being a woman with a career is somehow a consent to sex, and that's just not the case.
Weinstein looked on from the defense table as Newsom gave her testimony. He is currently serving a 23-year sentence for a conviction in New York.
5:37 now in your Health Watch. A new weapon to end the fentanyl epidemic is taking form. Researchers at the University of Houston are developing a vaccine designed to block fentanyl from making its way to the brain. The drug works by generating anti-fentanyl antibodies that eliminate the drug's potential high. While a vaccine could end the cycle of drug addiction, it would not prevent accidental overdoses among people trying street drugs, which are often laced with fentanyl. For addicts, the future possibly of regular vaccinations would likely be more effective than daily therapies like methadone.
So every day, you need to make that decision that you want to quit using drugs. Whereas with a vaccine, you only have to make that decision, once in a while.
Fentanyl is extremely dangerous. It's similar to morphine, but is 50 to 100 times more potent. The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.